This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the March meeting of the Governance and Finance Committees and the full board. We're here at the Sacandaga Field Office in Mayfield. For members of the public attending remotely, we ask that you please close other programs on your computer or phone, silence your cell phone, and mute your audio when not speaking. Agendas for today's meetings are available at hrbrrd.ny.gov under board meetings. The conference organizer will monitor the program's chat function for anyone wishing to address the board during the public comment period during the meeting of the full board. For anyone wishing to address the board, kindly use the chat function or email brao@hrbrrd.ny.gov or simply speak up during the public comment period during the full board meeting. I will now hand over the gavel to our Governance Committee Chair, Mr. Candido. Al?
Good morning. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I'll call the Governance Committee meeting to order. I'll stand Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
To the republic
the republic
which
for which it
stands
stands,
One
one nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
justice.
liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, Mr. Leslie, please.
Committee Chair Alfred Candido,
Here.
Committee Member Kenneth DeWitt,
Here.
Committee Members Albert Hayes
Here.
and Nicole Allen,
Here.
Board Chair Mark Finkel,
There.
Board Member Timothy Reagan,
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan,
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie, present, Chief Engineer Robert Fulton,
Here.
Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha,
Here.
Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Wozecki,
Here.
and my understanding is that Mr. Byrd is excused for an illness. That's everybody accounted for.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor?
Witness.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you. I need a motion for the approval of the September 10th, 2024 Governance Committee meeting minutes.
Make that motion. Mr. Hayes,
A second,
I'll second.
Ms. Allen,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you. On to committee business. We have several items of new business in front of us. We have a discussion of the annual review and approval of the investment policy. Mr. Manisha, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You find the investment policy resolution on page 5 of your packet. There are no changes proposed for the investment policy. The investment audit report conducted as part of the regulating district's annual financial statements audit last summer indicated no issues that needed to be addressed. Our investment practices are fairly simple and consistent with the investment policy. We actively monitor our cash flow, try to keep funds and bank accounts below the $250,000 FDIC insurance limit per bank, and move the remaining balances to the controller's short-term investment pool, where the funds are collateralized and actively managed. For the state fiscal year through January 31st, 2025, the short-term investment pool has generated an average yield of 5.1%. We could work a lot harder to attempt to generate additional yield while not giving up liquidity, but I do not believe that would be the highest and best use of our time given the controller's performance. And on that note, I'm happy to pause and answer any questions you may have.
If there are approval of the procurement policy. Motion?
Oh, you can't hardly hear it from there.
Yeah.
I make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
I'll second.
Ms. Allen,
All approved?
Aye.
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 Any, no abstention. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
You're coming
Okay.
in and out.
All right. Next discussion item is the annual review and approval of the procurement policy. Mr. Manisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the procurement policy resolution on page 10 of your packet. The overwhelming majority of the procurement policy remains unchanged from the version the board adopted 1 year ago. You may remember that the changes last year resulted in better alignment between the regulating district's procurement policy and the relevant sections of the public authorities law and associated state regulations. The only changes in this version are some clarifications on the amounts in section 6. Procurement policy is a workhorse of the many policies and procedures adopted by the regulating district over the years. The majority of staff use it on a fairly regular basis to guide procurement decisions, as well as the processes for paying claims made by those with whom the regulating district does business. It will guide us, for example, as we temporarily modify the way checks are reviewed and approved in the executive director's absence next month. With that, I'm happy to pause and answer any questions you may have about this resolution.
I have none.
None.
If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to advance to the full board.
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Allen?
I'll second that.
Mr. DeWitt?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you. And finally, with Mr. Manisha, the annual review and approval of property guidelines policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the disposition policy resolution on page 34 of your packet. There are no changes proposed for the disposition of property guidelines. In recent years, we worked closely with the Office of General Services to dispose of any surplus property and anticipate continuing this practice. And I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has.
Any questions?
I have none.
Being none, I'll entertain a motion to advance to the full board.
So moved.
Mr.
Second.
Hayes?
I'll second.
Ms. Allen?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Manisha. Moving on, we have our annual review of authority mission statement and performance measures. Mr. Leslie, please.
Thank you very much. I would start off our annual review by the annual reading of the Public Authority Mission Statement, which I will take a stab at. The mission of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District is to construct, maintain, and operate reservoirs in the Upper Hudson River and Black River watersheds, including the Sacandaga, Indian, Black, Moose, and Beaver rivers for the purpose of regulating the flow of streams or rivers when required by public welfare, including public health and safety. Regulating reservoirs operated by the regulating district include Great Sacandaga Lake, Indian Lake, Stillwater Reservoir, Sixth Lake, and Old Forge. Benefits derived through the successful completion of the mission include, but may not be limited to, flood protection to the public corporations, counties, and parcels of real estate, power plants, downstream of said impoundments. Low flow augmentation to provide sufficient water flow enabling downstream wastewater treatment plants to avoid increased treatment costs associated with waste discharge to lower volume rivers, and enabling downstream hydroelectric plants to generate low-cost hydroelectric power in the hot summer months when rates are generally highest. Any questions about the mission of the district?
I have none.
None.
Moving to the performance measures, which are also on page 40, I should mention. There has been some discussion this year I would turn it over to Mr. Callahan to run through the changes that were proposed.
Yeah, thank you, Counselor, and really, I also want to thank Mr. Reagan for engaging, not just over the last year, but I think for the last few years, and encouraging us to fine tune these goals and to get down to maybe a shorter and more measurable list, and some corresponding metrics that help us not only measure how we're doing, but importantly, improve how we're executing on our mission. And I think this is the first sort of iterative beginning of fine tuning those goals. This is, I expect, to be a living document. Mr. Reagan and I touched base as recently as yesterday. So I don't think we're done here, but if you look down past the initial list of goals that all include the word accomplished at the end of them, everything you see following that has been added. And importantly, I think these are metrics that we're hoping to measure in terms of customer service, in terms of our capital program delivery, and some corresponding metrics that will help us measure those things. But I think, and I'd ask Mr. Reagan to weigh in here too, I think it's important to engage in these new goals this year, see how effectively we can measure performance in those areas, see how we can translate that measurement into improved performance, and then revisit this next year to further cull the list down to a more refined list and a more measurable list that will help us excel even further in certain areas. And Mr. Reagan, I'd certainly ask you to weigh in on that as well.
Yeah, I think the thing I push John on is a good goal has two measurements to it. And, trying to push to make sure that we have the right measurements to measure whether we're being successful or not going forward. And then, like John says, it's a work in progress. So we'll continue to try to fine tune it. We have to work on making sure that we have the measurable goals right going forward. That needs a little work on it. And then the other thing that we talked about yesterday about two things that I know John's looking to do, which I think is extremely important, is go out and have a survey of our effectiveness of how we're doing. And then look at potentially having a focus group of some of the people, not all people that have gotta be nice now, and not all people that have a problem, but a good cross section of people, so we get good feedback that we can sit and say, okay, how effective are we against the goals? And the other thing John brought up, he hasn't got it on this, but he talked about it, and that was a succession or developmental plan, whatever you want to call it. A lot of different names for advancement plan. He's going to retire at some point in time. Are we getting somebody prepared, ready to step into his place, or do we have to go outside? We have other people, all right, you're getting gray hair, I don't know how old you are, but you're getting gray hair. How do we develop other people to make sure that we have I don't want to say you're getting old. I've had it since I was in my late 20s.
You happen to be sitting next to him.
Yeah, I've had it since I was late 20s, so what the hell. But how do we for key critical jobs that we have to move on? So that was another thing that we talked about.
Yeah, and I think that just to add to that, I mean, it's certainly just by virtue of the numbers, we know that there are a number of us throughout the organization and heavily weighted on the executive management side that will be retirement eligible in the next few years. And if everyone were to go to at once, that might leave the regulating district in a weakened position, and we certainly want to anticipate that. And I also want to take a moment to thank Megan Cole, who administers these board meetings for us, who's been working with me on the customer satisfaction survey that Mr. Reagan referenced, which will be going out with our winter/spring and increasingly spring newsletter here as it's not out the door just yet, but we're fine tuning that, and it'll be going out later this week or next week, and people will be able to take that customer satisfaction survey by clicking on a link embedded in the newsletter, but also we'll utilize our social media channels to push that out as well, and direct email. So we'll hopefully get a good cross section of, as Mr. Reagan said, not just folks with the beef, but
people who want to let us know how they think we're doing. So looking forward to that process. And the idea that becomes a baseline, then maybe every couple of years we send it back out. I think once, 1 year probably is not enough, probably every 2 years or something, but yeah, decide that.
Yeah.
And then you've got the baseline, then you're always comparing against your baseline. Have you improved? And the idea is through the focus group and all that is coming up with maybe 2 or 3, no more than that, of things that we want to focus on and improve. If you try to go after everything, it becomes too broad, but if you cut it down to a couple things that are manageable, then I think we can go after them successfully and do better. So that's all I had on that item, Counselor. Appreciate the time for a little additional discussion on that.
Absolutely.
The only thing I'd like to add is while they do say accomplished, I do think they're ongoing and continued as well. So just that we're not acknowledging that we're done with those efforts, but
Okay.
continuing to pursue.
Important point. Accomplished for last year.
Correct.
For the time period. The final element of this is whether the board members acknowledge that they have read and understood the mission, understand that they wield the power to appoint the management of public authority. If the board appoints management, which they do they have a policy which you follow when appointing said management? Article 7 of the bylaws establishes that policy and enumerates the qualifications necessary for each appointment. And then the board, being primary maker of policy for the district, directs senior management in the exercise of all power and authority granted by our enabling statute. There is an acknowledgement which in the past we have had everybody sign and submit to the authority's budget office. That acknowledgement and submission process is no longer necessary, but a general assent of the members of the board that they understand their mission and that they understand the policies governing that mission is sufficient.
I just thought the second floor was the place that had all authority, but I guess I was wrong on that.
Well,
I'm only kidding. Yeah, I know, that does not necessitate a response, in other words. Okay. Thank you.
the second floor does have the authority to appoint members of the board. The board is set free to act.
Did we get a question there from Mr. Byrd?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's it. And
Is that it, Mr. Leslie?
that is.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And there's no board action required here, as I understand it, correct? We just received your review? Okay.
Discussion, if any.
All right, thank you. And our final item for our agenda is we need a presentation from Mr. Callahan on a recommendation to adopt a resolution to hire temporary seasonal laborers. Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the board is aware, each year we supplement our dedicated and capable full-time permanent staff with, in recent years, up to 6 temporary summer labor positions. The details are embedded in the resolution that appears on page 43 of your packet. I want to thank the Director of Administrative Services for administering this program and coordinating the selection. If we can find them, kind of like the 18, if you can find them, you can hire them. And we do get the 18 typically with our dedicated summer staff. A little more difficult to hire in the Black River area, as Mr. Reagan can attest. I think a member of his family was formerly part of the summer workforce there. But certainly we do look for staff to supplement the Black River Field Office, and of course here in the Hudson River area, the Sacandaga Field Office as well. With that, I pause for any questions any of the members may have, but we'd ask for your support on this resolution.
There being no questions, I'll entertain a motion to advance to the full board this resolution.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
I'll second.
Mr. Hayes, Ms. Allen?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you. That ends our agenda for this committee meeting. Motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Allen?
Second.
I'll second.
There you go.
Mr. DeWitt.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Now the meeting of the governance committee is adjourned. Mr. Chairman, the gavel's yours.
Well, I will then call on Mr. DeWitt for the finance committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call the March 11th Finance Committee meeting to order. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Committee Chair Kenneth DeWitt,
Here.
committee members Albert Hayes and Timothy Reagan.
Here.
Here.
Board Chair Mark Finkel.
Here.
Board members Richard Byrd, Nicole Allen,
Here.
and Alfred Candido.
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan.
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie present. Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minicha.
Here.
Chief Engineer Robert Fultan.
Here.
And the Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
All accounted.
Thank you, Mr. Leslie. Can I have a motion to adopt or revise the meeting agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Reagan,
I will second that.
Mr. Hayes,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. Can I have an motion to approve the June 20th, 2024 Financial Committee meeting minutes?
He'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes,
I'll second it.
Mr. Reagan,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Under new committee business, new business, can I motion to advance to the full board and recommend adoption of a resolution approving budget and financial plan required pursuant to section 2801 of the Public Authority Law? Mr. Minicha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the projected multi-year financial plan on pages 51 and 52 of your packet, with a memo and the underlying resolution immediately preceding the plan. You may recall from prior years that this multi-year financial plan, including its format, is required by law of New York State public authorities. So going across the top, the headings, last year actual 2024 represents financial data taken from the regulating district's audited financial statements. The individual revenue and expenditure budgets differ somewhat from the items the regulating district uses, but the bottom line for excess or deficiency of revenues and capital contributions over expenditures match that found in the regulating district's audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. In the next column, current year estimated 2025 represents the year-to-date results for the first 8 months of the current fiscal year and our best projections for revenue to be received and expenditures to be made through June 30th. Proposed 2026 and 2027 represent the 2 fiscal years that make up the rest of the current 3-year budget cycle. proposed 2028 and 2029 are arrived at by applying inflationary increases to the figures from prior years and making other adjustments based on current expectations for specific revenue and expenditure items. And with that, as an overview, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about this projected financial plan.
And if no more discussion, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Reagan?
Second?
I will second that.
Mr. Hayes?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Can I have a motion for a resolution to further amend the agreement with Harris Beach PLLC CO 12022 to provide bond counsel services in connection with the anticipated issuance of serial bonds or other financing of infrastructure improvements? Mr. Minutia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You can find the resolution on page 53 of your packet. 1 year ago, we asked the board to review and approve the second amendment to this contract with Harris Beach, the regulating district's bond counsel. We did so because the prevailing legal basis for financing infrastructure improvements at the time of the original procurement of Harris Beach services had changed significantly as the legal research and analysis progressed. This required time and energy that was not anticipated in the original contract, hence the request for a second amendment last March. In the weeks and months since last March, we have continued to rely on the trusted advice of Harris Beach as we work through additional tensions between the regulating district's bond documents and its enabling statute. For these reasons, we ask the board to approve this execution of the second option to extend the contract for an additional year and add another $15,000 so Harris Beach can continue its outstanding legal work. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this resolution.
Any more discussion? Thank you, Mr. Minutia. Can I have a motion?
I will make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second it.
Mr. Reagan?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Reagan?
I will second that.
Mr. Hayes?
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Mr. Chairman, you have the gavel.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call to order the March meeting of the Hudson River Black River Regulating District Board. Mr. Leslie, roll call, please.
Board Chair Mark Finkel?
Here.
Board members Albert Hayes? Here. Richard Byrd? Timothy Reagan?
Here.
Nicole Allen?
Here?
Kenneth DeWitt?
Here?
And Alfred Candido?
Here.
Executive Director John Callahan?
Here.
General Counsel Robert Leslie here. Chief Engineer Robert Fulton? Chief Fiscal Officer Timothy Minutia?
Here.
And the Director of Administrative Services Stephanie Rizzi?
Here?
Thank you very much. I need a motion to adopt today's agenda, the agenda for today's meeting. I'll give it up.
I'll make that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 I know there's no guests here in the building.
Everybody on?
And public comment period. Is there anybody online that would like to address the board? Hearing
No one
nothing?
has let me know so far, so I'm assuming no.
Okay. Then in that case, we need the approval of the January 14th, 2025 regular board meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
We have a second, please.
I'll second it.
Sal and Mr.
Any
Rizzi?
discussion, changes, or comments? Not all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we have the report of our executive director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My report appears on pages 63 and 64 in your board packet. I'll just note a couple of things. in particular. One is the outstanding work of the executive leadership team here that has helped support primarily Mr. Minich's ongoing discussions with Division of Budget. I know Mr. Minich has already reported out to the board of what was included in the governor's proposed budget. And subsequent to that, we've had a very encouraging meeting. As we know, we moved forward with certain open items and unknowns. So I'm very encouraged by that. I thank everybody for the great work in that. I also want to note something I'm particularly proud of, and that is, as you know, Mr. Chairman, and as Nicole and Albert know, because they were kind enough, the three of you were kind enough to attend our de-escalation training last week in Johnstown. We know that a number of our staff here in the office, out in the field, and any one of us really can be put in a position of having to deal with somebody who is upset about something that the regulating district regulates or is otherwise involved in, and protecting each other, making sure that we can execute our mission and do it safely is paramount. So we had a day-long session prepared by Pollock Peace Building Solutions. They did a great job. I want to thank the Director of Administrative Services for setting this training up, making the day a success. And for all of you who attended and all the staff, I think we really took something important away from that. Increasingly, there's a supercharged environment out there. People are more and more willing to confront public servants or anybody really. So in light of that, this was very, very important. And thank you again for attending. Also want to note with a great deal of pride and thanks again to the Director of Administrative Services and certainly our permit team, Stephanie Porter, Dan Kiskus, and most especially working with Stephanie, Danielle Dunn, whose efforts have led to my being able to say today that you can now go on our website and apply for a work permit online, just as over the last few years you've been able to renew online. I'm not going to steal Stephanie's thunder on what our numbers are so far in the renewal for this year, but suffice it to say, continued improvement in that area and new customer service benefit for the people we serve. And lastly, I would just like to thank everybody who participating in these meetings mutes their microphone when not speaking, because that's very, very important for everybody to be able to hear. If you're participating and not speaking, very easy to hit that mute button, and we support that throughout all these meetings, Mr. Chairman. So with that, I'll pause and for any questions that any of the members have. Thank you very much.
On that criteria.
Yeah.
Somebody is not muted. You can check that, please.
All right. It's almost gone. Yeah. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Callahan? Okay, if not, we'll move on to staff and committee reports. Governance committee report, Mr. Candido.
Mr. Chairman, the Governance Committee has advanced to the full board for their action several resolutions. The first is the resolution to satisfy the annual review and approval of the investment policy.
Okay, we all heard that in the report. If I have a motion to accept the resolution,
Can we make that motion, Mr. Hayes?
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Reagan?
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a resolution to satisfy the annual review and approval of procurement policy.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Reagan?
Second,
I'll second.
Ms. Allen?
any further discussion or questions?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, a resolution to satisfy the annual review and approval of property guideline policy. Motion,
I'll make that motion.
Ms. Allen?
second.
I'll second that.
Mr. Hayes?
My little machine.
Any, well, as I said, we've all heard about it.
Yes.
We were all here at committee meetings. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Next, annual review, excuse me, of authority, mission statement, and performance measures. I need a motion.
Albert. I'd make that motion.
I'll
Second, all in favor?
Do it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Lastly, resolution to hire temporary seasonal laborers to supplement permanent staff in the Hudson River area and Black River area. Motion to accept?
I'll make that motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Next, we move to the Finance Committee report. And first, we need a resolution approving budget and financial plan required pursuant to section 2801 of the Public Authority Law. Motion to accept?
I'll make that motion. Mr. Hayes?
I'll
Second.
second.
Ms. Allen?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next, resolution to further amend the agreement with Harris Beach PLLC to provide bond counsel services in connection with the anticipated issuance of serial bonds or other financing of infrastructure improvements. That was a lot.
Make that motion.
Second?
Mr. Hayes?
I'll second that.
Mr. Ray?
Any further discussion or comments?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Next, we move to staff reports. General Counsel, Mr. Leslie.
I continue to engage with the General Recoveries Unit, Civil Recovery Bureau of the Attorney General's Office regarding Erie Bovine Hardy Power. Basically, talks look like they have broken down between those two entities. Erie owes us about $4.1 million at this point.
It's a roller coaster of emotions there for a minute.
It certainly is. I apologize. I got flustered. And we do have a site visit, tentative date for a site visit with the Attorney General's office. So we're confident that representation is moving forward in a positive direction for the regulating district. Other than that, I participated in a few things.
Rob, just on that, is
Yep.
there any, like dates of, okay, so this thing doesn't go on for another 2 years. Is there a set period of time where this is gonna go to a court or this has gotta happen, that we can follow the progress?
We asked the Attorney General what their end date is, basically asking them what the statute of limitations for this claim would be. And I think they said June 29th of 2029. It's a 6-year statute of limitations on a contract action, which is consistent with what I thought they were gonna say. So we could be waiting quite some time before the Attorney General is forced to act by statute, or risk abandoning our claim. That said, we are pushing them continuously, but it's kind of like pushing a rope. You get some play out of it, but it's not as
I guess I don't understand why they are not wanting to resolve this.
I believe they have a number of competing priorities, and my understanding is that the senior attorney brought it to her section chief, who brought it to the bureau chief, who brought it to the assistant AG, we brought it to the deputy assistant AG, who, somewhere in that chain, somebody has final say as to whether they proceed. A complaint has been drafted. The complaint is under review, is the mantra that they have used.
And would you agree, Counselor, that, we go much further than what we've just discussed here would probably be better, because this is pending litigation, probably be better discussed in executive session?
Yeah, I mean, these are all procedural things that we can discuss in open meeting. But were we to get further into the basis for the claim, the likelihood of success, et cetera, the timing of us becoming more strident in our request, those things probably should go to executive session.
Okay, we can do that.
Is that it?
Okay.
The balance of my report is definitely here at some point, page 65. And John has spoken about some of the things that we've worked on. Some of the things continue to trickle it along without much resolution. Speaking of the village of Northville, Causeway, working on permitting issues, work with the Department of Environmental Conservation about recalcitrant marina owners, et cetera. But I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Leslie?
And
No, thank you. Director of Administrative Services, Ms. Brzee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report is located on page 66 of the board packet. During the reporting period, I performed quarterly and monthly internal control compliance audits. These audits are completed to ensure we are functioning effectively and adhering to relevant regulations. The district's annual MWBE and SDVOB goal plan documents have been submitted. These documents outline our projected budget and estimation of how well we will achieve established goals. Established goals by the state are 30% for MWBE and 6% for SDVOB. We received our MWBE report card for fiscal year 23-24, quarters 1 and 2. I am happy to let you know that we received an A+ for our success and effectiveness of our MWBE efforts. As the executive director mentioned regarding our online portal, we are 92% paid at this point with permits. 70% of those paid have been paid online, and the total permits paid right now are 4,483 as of this morning. On pages 67 to 69 are the contract status sheets. They are included in your board packet each time to satisfy the public authority requirement. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. If not, that completes my report.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may find the CFO report on page 70 of your packet. You may have noted in your review that year-to-date regulating district expenses exceed revenue by a little over 4.9 million. This arises largely because regulating district payments to the engineering and construction firms for their work at Indian Lake are capital or long-term expenses. Reimbursement for the construction expenses the regulating district receives from the New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation, while increasing cash on hand, is not a revenue, therefore thus leaving the shortfall noted above. If the regulating district's year-to-date expenses for engineering and construction at Indian Lake, totaling a little over 5.8 million, were excluded from the calculations above, the regulating district would be showing short-term or operating net revenue of $944,313 for the July 1 to February 28, 2025 period. These expenses are expected to be capitalized at the end of the fiscal year. And as I have done a fair amount of talking here this morning, I'm going to stop and offer to answer any questions any of you have about any aspect of the regulated district's financials.
Do we have any questions? We need board members.
We do, as a matter of fact. And I'd like to call your attention to the signed affidavit you can find on page 111 of your packet. Witness necessary and reasonable expenses incurred by board members related to their participation in the January board meeting. Article 3, Section 2 of the regulating district's bylaws require the board to approve payment before any reimbursement can be made. And before asking you for a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve these expense reimbursements, I'm happy to answer any questions that any other board members have about that.
Hearing none, I'd like a motion to approve the board member expenses.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Reagan,
Second,
A second.
Ms. Allen,
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, Chief Engineer, Mr. Fulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, my report begins on page 112. February's precipitation in both the Hudson and the Black River areas averaged about 110% of average. For our reservoirs prepared for and appropriately positioned for spring runoff, which in the last week or so is commenced, and we are now in the process of refilling with some more substantial inflow expected this coming weekend as temperatures are rising well above freezing all the way through the Adirondacks, and there's some rain predicted also. My report also includes summaries for ongoing construction at Indian Lake and the progress that's being made there. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. That concludes my report.
And just
No
note,
questions or comments?
and add to Mr. Fulton's report. Obviously, we've talked to the board quite a bit about Indian Lake in the past, including the presentation by Colliers late last year. Nothing to bring back to the board for this meeting, but stay tuned, as someone once said. We believe, and one of the reasons we may leave the board meeting location for the May meeting as TBD would be the prospect of a meeting in Indian Lake, followed by a site visit at the dam, where I think the board would be incredibly impressed, as I am every time I go up there, at the amount of work that's been done, but also important to see how some of this emergent work could develop in the course of a project this complex. But certainly we look forward to talking to the board quite a bit more as other things come into better focus relative to the regulating district's finances, and also plans for potentially moving forward with some of that emergent work. Chief engineer and I have a meeting here tomorrow with both the contractor and Colliers Engineering Design to talk through some of those issues as we continue to do. But also want to note that it's possible, depending on when we wrap up the as-built and DEC's acceptance of Hawkinsville, that we may have 3 capital projects ongoing for a short period of time at once this year, depending on when that's officially signed off on by DEC and when we go out to bid on Old Forge and Six Lakes. So a lot of business for the engineering department last couple of years and for the next few. So Mr. Reagan, I think Rob's going to have to push that retirement date out to about 2035, no matter how great his hair gets. Really some great work by everybody moving these projects forward.
Thank you. Any other board member questions or comments? If not, I need a net resolution for our next board meeting, which is May 13th, and it was indicated at a place to be determined. I need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
I need a motion to go into executive session if we want to discuss this issue.
The thing is there really anything to discuss?
I would probably say not yet.
Not yet, okay.
In response to Mr. Reagan's question,
Yeah.
maybe more impetus at the next meeting, would you say, Council?
I would hope so.
Okay,
Fair enough.
well, then I need a
I
motion.
just have one question on that. Do we have, since we're in charge, and not the second floor, do we have the ability to ask the second floor that we would like a timeline of when this thing's gonna be done? Or at least being moved to some sort of litigation to get it resolved?
Do, so, the governor is separately elected from the attorney general. The laws in the state of New York require the district to seek approval from the attorney general before we hire outside counsel. We've asked the attorney general to represent us directly. If the attorney general determines they're not going to proceed, we would then be in a better position to tell the attorney general we intend to hire outside counsel. That said, were the governor to approach the attorney general to, on our behalf, to move this forward, we anticipate that would be received welcome, or welcomed, I suppose is the way to put that. We have not made that overture to the counsel for the governor yet, but we have told them that we may be making that request in the short future.
Let me just add to that, if I may, overall, and this is a discussion that has been a featured part of our dialogue with the executive chamber really over the last 3 years, as this issue has evolved, and they've been very engaged, very supportive. But I think as Mr. Leslie has indicated, for us as a state entity, the attorney general is the first step.
Right.
In further to his point about their having to sort of decline to continue the case in order to get us out there looking for outside counsel. There's no indication. We haven't gotten any indication. Just the opposite, rather. The case is strong. They've written a great, I think, complaint, and it's taking a little bit longer than we'd all like, for sure. But relative to our upcoming meeting and the potential of a site visit, all the message that we're getting right now from the Assistant Attorney General that Mr. Leslie's working with is there I shouldn't say full speed ahead. I almost said full speed ahead, but 100% committed to pushing this forward.
They're certainly very engaged. They're asking relevant questions. They're obviously reading materials that we've provided them.
My thoughts are strictly financial, more so than anything else. And financial in two ways. So let me make sure I've got this straight. Since we'll have that big miss as far as income coming in, that money then, the cost will then go back against the individual counties and to be distributed of our loss?
Not quite. I'm going to take a shot here, Tim. And
Feeling very comfortable.
Feel free to kick me under the table. The existing 3-year spending plan, including the 3 successive 1-year budgets with the annualized equal assessments, does not contemplate our getting this revenue. So it's not built in. If we were to get, for instance, the revenue restored, in addition to the back rent, so to speak, that we're owed currently, that would be income that we would get. That would not be directly applied to a subsequent 3-year spending plan because the statute is pretty prescriptive on this, right? Estimate your annual expenses, apply other revenue that you're going to get. What's left over, the assessed parties need to pick up in the Hudson River area and Black River area. So we'd be
So to
in
make
this
sure I got
cycle.
what you just said right, so I'm not sure. I'm
Well,
following it completely.
just pause and make sure that I got it right.
Okay. So what you're saying is, we've not built in that money into our 3-year plan out of going, so that money then, the additional money to run this has already gone and factored back into the individual county.
The assessments that the counties are paying now does not include this
Yeah,
revenue.
if it doesn't have that included, then it's got to have gone back to the county to pay the difference.
We have not incorporated this source of funds into the current year, next year, or the following year budgets.
I follow that.
Period.
So then the gap then, the additional money required that makes up for this money that would have been in there, then goes back to the individual county.
When you say goes back to, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but let me say this, that because that source was not available, we obviously had to look at all of the other sources that are available to us, including the ultimate source, which is the assessment, and the 5 Hudson River area counties.
That's what that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think, probably not saying it right, but I'm following you now.
I hope.
So it goes back to those 5 counties, the $1 million shortfall, let's just use $1 million, easy. The $1 million shortfall is split up amongst those counties.
Let's try this then. Had Erie continued to pay this source of funds,
Yeah.
holding everything else constant, the assessment of the 5 Hudson River area counties could have been less.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay, I follow it. Okay, so that's the case. That's one. All right, I got that. So there's that obligation back to those counties of going through. The second part, I guess the bigger part is, by not paying that money, not paying any increases that we've all seen on our individual power at home of going forward and stuff. How does all that unfold? How are we made whole for the money if this ever gets resolved and it's in our favor? How do we ever get made whole for the money that they've been holding back on us?
Well, any agreement that we would reach through, or any decision through litigation, or an agreement in contemplation to avoid continued litigation, would seek the stream of revenue that we would have gotten at whatever rate we would agree to. So there'd be a lump sum owed from July 1st, 2023 through whenever we settle, in addition to an ongoing.
So what it's
annual
safe,
rent.
so what it's safe, or what we could, not guaranteed in any way whatsoever, but what could happen as part of the settlement is we could actually end up with quite a bit less money than what we would have been paid if they had continued the agreement and moved forward like they should have with us supplying them the power. As part of the settlement.
I would challenge that. I believe we're going to get dollar for dollar everything that we're owed, and they're going to pay us a state mandated interest on top of that judgment. Perhaps, depending on how the Attorney General pursues this, we will be pursuing further damages
Okay.
from.
So I'm just wondering, who's coming up with that number, Rob? So that number
That
of
number will be-
dollar for
that
dollar,
number
or whether
will
it's
be-
based on prime, whether it's based on new rates that have gone into
At
effect.
this point, we should go to executive session.
No, maybe this would be a good thing to have a meeting, our next meeting, just take a few minutes just to explain that to us. So there's, some people can get some thoughts together. He probably got it, but instead of spending everybody's time today.
Yeah, it would be in an executive session.
Yes.
Which we certainly could do today, but I think we'll be probably.
I think better, have some better information if we can.
With the meeting coming up with the AAG, but probably in an even better position to have a more informed discussion at the May meeting.
Okay. We hope so. Yes.
So we will plan on an executive session for the next meeting. The last thing we have here is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much.